Hello. I'm driving, I forget the name of this road, but anyway, it's a cut across from north of Newell, South Dakota over to Highway 85. Just short little road, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to pull out onto Highway 85 south of Buffalo, South Dakota, and head north. And yeah, I'm using this footage again. It's just kind of cool with the mist and the snow. And I remember it was kind of miserable driving, but it was getting better by this point. Still patches like that with snow across the road, but getting better. But hopefully in a week or two I'll have something, a little bit better scenery for you. We'll see what happens. I've got big plans coming, and well, we'll fill you in as I get there. But I wanted to do this video today about driving videos in general, why I do them, what started them, where I'm headed with them, and so on. So I'll start with a little, and we're actually going to get into a little bit of research stuff too, because research is a big part of these now. So let's start with why, or how I started doing them. Well, my very first one or two and they're in the same playlist as this one. I was a different person back then, but I was actually filling in at a church, if you can imagine, and driving home, and I had to do it for about a month, and I got the bright idea after watching it on somebody else's channel, honestly, of, hey, I should talk while I drive. So I took my iPad, laid it on, I had to lay coats and things on the seat so it would look at me, it could be propped up, and it would, not have the vibration of the car and so on. And so I narrated two of those, but that's not conducive to good driving. Now, as if you've watched these videos, traffic isn't really a thing I deal with. Sorry to those of you living in cities, it's just not. So probably safer for me than for people living in, say, Los Angeles or Chicago. But anyway, that wasn't my thing. And one of the problems with that is you have to keep up a steady patter of conversation. If I get bored talking, or I just decide, I'm run out of things to say, I just stop this. And then I can pick it up later. And I have an outline here. Couldn't do that then. So I made two of them, and that was enough. They were get-to-know-me type videos anyway. Personal, who am I, what I do for fun, that kind of thing. And I'm quite a different person now, so, that was a waste of time, except maybe as a record of who I used to be. So then I started using my iPad, and I would hold it in my hand and drive. Now I had some rules for myself, because obviously that's not the safest thing. Only on gravel roads, and only when there were no vehicles around other than me. Which, on a gravel road, isn't that hard to do, especially here in North Dakota. And the roads here are straight. So that worked. It wasn't the greatest. But my all-time most viewed video that is still up is actually a video called Why I Live in North Dakota. I still get comments on that on a regular basis. It's not a particularly well-filmed video, but it shows some interesting scenery and does some of what I do in my driving videos. I go visit Fort Dilts and so on. In fact, I might redo that as a get out of the house type of video, because I can't believe how much I've been stuck at this house, even with school done. But anyway, that didn't last long because the quality's bad. It's shaky. I drive a stick shift, so every time I have to shift gears, down goes the iPad, shift gears, and it just doesn't work. So I bought a dash cam. And I used that dash cam for many years. Well, I shouldn't say many years, but several years. It worked well. But I decided to replace it with this dash cam, which so far I've been very pleased with. The only thing I don't like with this one is the screen on it just is white unless I hold it down, and it's too late for the warranty, but it does record good videos, so hey, I don't watch stuff on it. All I really need the screen for is to make sure I've got the camera aimed right, and then boom. I mean, I don't even have to press buttons, it just starts recording, so that's awesome. Now, I've had some comments over the years, and I should point this out. When I record these videos, yes, I'm running a dash cam. What I'm doing in the car is listening to The Economist on my iPad, hook it into the car's sound system, or I'm listening to music on the iPad. I'm not talking. I've even got a video I recorded with my parents in the car. The quality of sound isn't very good on that dash cam. I think it's kind of cool. I took them up to, it doesn't matter where, but I'll just tell you what the heck. Fairview Lift Bridge and Cartwright Tunnel. I took them up there so they could see it. And dash cam running the whole way. And after they'd left, I was looking at the footage and realized, hey, I have my parents' voices and a conversation. None of us are thinking about the fact the dash cam's recording everything. And I don't know, maybe I was a little maudlin at that time, but I just was thinking, someday that'll all be a memory. Just riding with my parents and talking to them. So I've had a hard time deleting that piece of footage. I've also had a hard time sharing it. Now, of course, I would mute the audio for a public audience. It might be interesting to share the audio. I don't know. After they're gone, of course, but I don't know. But no reason not to share the footage. It's a nice drive, so maybe one of these days I'll share the footage. But anyway, generally I'm sitting, as I'm doing right now, sitting in the living room, and or else I'll sit in the kitchen. It's kind of fun sitting in the kitchen in the evening watching the sun go down out the kitchen window while I record these. But I add the narration later, so if you hear notes rustling or that squeak sound, that's all from the living room. It's not me driving in the car, and I'm not trying to remember all this in the car. So when I got the dash cam, then I started, now I need a topic to go with this. And at first I didn't want to be too controversial. I was very afraid of it. And I'd get comments, anything I said that was remotely controversial, but why don't you stick to pen videos? So I started off mostly very inoffensive things like packing for traveling, why I live in North Dakota, which I think I said is my most watched one. But over time, and I couldn't help it, I got into more specific topics. Now, they always tell you to avoid talking about religion or politics. I haven't done too much with religion, although I guess I did one last week on the Ten Commandments. But believe me, I could really go on about all those topics if I really wanted to. And my personal opinion on that, take it as a personal opinion, an intelligent mind can evaluate an idea, but that doesn't mean you have to take it on. You listen to it and you're like, nope, sorry. Or maybe you're like, oh, doggone it. See, proof I'm in my living room. So you may be thinking that sounded an awful lot like an old-fashioned rotary dial phone. That's because that's what it is. I forget where I picked that up, but one of the houses I lived in and owned. But anyway, it's traveled with me. Actually, it looks kind of cool. It's that whole retro thing. And the house I live in right now, I have a touch-tone phone that doesn't make any ringing type sounds. I'm pretty sure I probably flipped the switch and turned them off, but whatever. The rotary dial phone's in the bedroom, and this is such a small house, you hear it all throughout the house. And if the windows are open, I'd hear it outside too. It's loud. You heard it. Wake you up and if you're sleeping. But anyway, I know, and to answer a question a few people have asked, no, I don't own a cell phone. It's on my list of things I think that I should own. I don't really feel a need to talk to people when I'm traveling, and I guess the main reason I would consider it is to call for help if I get in an accident or a car breaks down or something. But then I think, like along here, if I go zipping off the road here, the cell phone isn't going to work anyway, because it's just too far away from a cell tower. So, I don't know. There's a whole town near me where you can't get cell service right now because of the weird geography. One or two houses you can, and the elementary teacher or elementary principal tells me that if you go to the playground behind, this is where our rural elementary school is, if you go to the playground behind it, you can get cell service in one corner of it. That has to do with the hills, or I should call them buttes, all around the town. So, yeah. But that is totally off of my outline, and I should have double-checked where I was at with my outline before I started this. But okay, here we go. But I was talking about how an intelligent mind can evaluate an idea without taking it on. So I'll tell you what's going on with these. Originally, I had the idea that, I'm going to... my whole link will be I'm taking notes with my fountain pen, and I'd find some cheesy way to work that in. Well, no, it didn't happen. I stuck to the content. And I've heard the advice that channels should be one topic. Like if I'm a fountain pen channel, I should stick to fountain pens. If I want to build my brand, because otherwise people look and they're like, what's this channel actually about? Is it a fountain pen channel? Is it a political channel? Is it a religious channel? A makeup channel? Actually, I've never done a makeup video in my life and probably never will. But, you know what I mean. And I'm not good at that. I've even thought about spinning the driving videos off into a separate channel. But then I think, So, here it is. I don't want to scare off viewers with these. At the same time, I think this is a writing channel. I think of fountain pen users as people who write. That would be people of ideas, thinkers, people of words. And I like to think of people like that as a little more high-minded and a little bit more able to, as I said, take on an idea, evaluating it, without necessarily accepting it. Some ideas are even offensive. But the ability to look at it. A couple of years ago, I read Albert Speer's... I forgot the name of the book. He was Hitler's architect. See, I went for the worst one I could think of. Godwin's Law, right? I can't remember the name of his memoir, but anyway, I read it because it was interesting to look at his perspective. That doesn't mean I agreed with him. Same thing, we had to read... what was it? In college, when we studied the Second World War, we read one of the... Was it Hitler's book? We didn't read Mein Kampf. I don't remember anymore. It's been too long. But the point is, evaluating something without necessarily taking it on. So I try and do a couple of things with this. I don't want to turn people off. If people are turned off just because I disagree with them politically or religiously, well, okay. That's your prerogative, I guess. But I don't want to lose people because of my presentation. And I know these aren't necessarily bombastic, exciting presentations, but here's a simple one. No name calling. And I try to do this with any of my social media encounters. You hear the Trumpansies and the libtards and all that kind of stuff thrown around. What's the point? As soon as you start doing that, you're going to turn people off. They're not paying attention to your words. Well, they are, but not your content. They're paying attention to your insults. You're immediately raising their hackles so they don't listen to your ideas. So I try to avoid name calling. It just distracts from your message. What I've tried to do, or at least how this has evolved, is I try to dive into a topic. I try to do multiple sources. Usually I'll have some footnotes of further links to either support what I said or show where I got it or give you further reading. I think it's important to go back to primary sources and reputable sources. That actually is a topic worth discussing a little bit. When you were in high school, did your English teacher require you to give textual evidence? So you say something about the work you're reading, but then you have to cite exactly where in the work that you got this from. I know kids here where I teach hate that. But I'll tell you what she's teaching them. She's teaching them to cite sources. Spouting off opinions, kind of like what I'm doing in this video, isn't so useful. So I will throw in a link here to what primary, secondary, and tertiary sources are. A lot of what I've been doing has been opinion so far, so I don't have links for that. But this is a different sort of chatty video anyway. When I was in college and high school, I saw this whole topic as more of an academic exercise rather than particularly important. But now, in this age where we have so many people on social media, which wasn't really a thing when I was in college, citing fake news, bringing up things that are legitimately not true. I used to debunk using Snopes, which is a debunking website, but then I started to get, that's a liberal website. And so my debunking was totally ignored. What Snopes does is, they may have a liberal point of view. I'm fine with that. But what Snopes does is they will go back to original sources and they will cite their sources for debunking a claim, which I really appreciate. So now when I debunk something, I will go to Snopes, but I'll go back to their original sources and perhaps find some sources of my own in order to debunk. And that brings me to primary sources. These are the closest to the fact. When you look at one of my fountain pen videos, and I show you the pen writing, and I show you the pen, you have a primary source. Now, my impressions of the pen, I don't know. I'm kind of gray on whether that would be primary or secondary. But the actual writing of the pen itself and the actual appearance of the pen, that's a primary source. The actual study and data on a scientific topic would be a primary source. The journal article about their research would be the primary source. When Scientific American or Discover magazine or the news media get hold of a study, they're usually either secondary or tertiary sources. When you go back to your primary source, the problem you find sometimes is they might be very hard to use. There are some specific ways of writing a journal article that aren't necessarily the best for communicating with the layman or laywoman. They are very much for the expert in that field. So I'm not denigrating a secondary source at all. Secondary sources are very important because they do communicate with the masses, as it were. Another problem sometimes with primary sources is the layperson often doesn't understand the messiness of real research because most of us don't engage in the kind of research that these people do. We don't have to understand it. It's good if we do. I try to expose my students to it. I like it that we pool our class data and we're not all getting the same result, and we can talk about methods to analyze the data. Or maybe the lab doesn't work out at all and we can talk about that. That's part of the messiness of real research that people don't like. They like black and white, which I'll come back to that because that's later in my outline and I'm jumping ahead. I was talking about types of sources. So your secondary source is going to interpret your primary source. So my opinions on the pen, I suppose those are more secondary. The pen itself is the primary. I like secondary sources. I like Scientific American. I'm not going to subscribe to all these different specialized journals. I might have the background to understand some of them. A lot of them I do not. I have my physics degree, but I'm only a bachelor's level, so I'm not high level at all. And yeah, so I like those types of magazines. I kind of like Scientific American better than Discover magazine, but that's a personal thing, and I'm getting off the topic again. So your tertiary sources are further away. That's when, say, the Daily Mail starts reporting on some study, and they totally goof it up. These are going to repeat findings. They'll often hype them. These are the ones that will cause things like the Alar scare, where they talk about how Alar causes cancer in rats, and it's sprayed on your apples. Oh no! And they're not scientists. These are reporters. In fact, a lot of the news media is really lacking in actual scientifically minded people doing the reporting on science, so they hype things. And of course, the whole goal behind these types of media is to hype, to get eyeballs for short attention spans who are not scientists. So they will blow things out of proportion all the time. And what's scary about that to me is people will read that and then they'll think that's what science is. And it's not. This is far, far from the original research. This is some frantic reporter trying to get eyeballs and advertising dollars. And often your tertiary sources will have a point of view. They may even omit or change your findings. There's a video channel I like. He doesn't make the videos very often, but when you watch one of his videos, you will understand why. He does what I do. I shouldn't say that. What he does is what I wish I had the time to do. There we go. I like that better. Potholer 54. And what he will do is he will do a deep dive to debunk various claims. I was interested recently in a series of one or two videos where he debunked Prager University and he debunked Steven Crowder. The Steven Crowder example specifically, Steven Crowder is some YouTuber. I've never watched him, but apparently he hyped some findings that said that global warming, global climate change isn't really a thing, and NASA's backing off from it. What he did is used a secondary or tertiary source. I'd say Steven Crowder was a tertiary source, but he may have been using a tertiary source that went back to another source, which went back to another source, which finally ended up at the primary source, often without citation. So Potholer 54 had to do a lot of digging to find it. I watched the whole thing. I put it in the links. That's what the footnote there was about. But the point is, he had shown that the actual study that Steven Crowder was referencing said the exact opposite of what Steven Crowder was saying. Well, Steven Crowder did not go back to the original source, and that was the problem. Now, the trouble with debunking like this is it takes time. Maybe your weird uncle pops something up on Facebook and you know it's false, but you know it's going to take you a while to find the source that shows that it's false, and you're just like, whatever. That's part of why Potholer 54 posts videos so infrequently, is it takes a lot of time to do what he does. Your debunking might not happen until long after the original nonsense has had its impact. And sometimes your debunking will just get totally ignored because emotion or opinion, why let facts change your firmly held opinions, are much stronger than the debunking. I did a series of videos, was a year or two ago, about why facts don't often change your mind. And, well, I'll give you an example of a debunking I did just recently. So this winter, the flu was pretty bad. And you probably know that we have a flu vaccine. It's not always effective. They're kind of taking a gamble which strain of flu will become the popular one. And, flu vaccines or flu viruses mutate so quickly. That's why they have to keep coming up with new vaccines. But anyway, I read a claim on Facebook from somebody I work with who claimed that that this flu vaccine actually made the flu worse, according to one of the people who worked on with the vaccine. So I researched the claim. The claim itself was a repost, because that's what this person often does, is repost stuff that they read on their ultra scary right-wing religious websites. And it was one of those outrage machine type websites designed to scare mothers. And so I researched back even further, found the original reference, and wouldn't you know it, that's not what it meant at all. The doctor or nurse, I forget now. This is not on my outline. I just wrote flu vaccine story on my outline because I figured I'd remember all the details, and I'm not. But all in the links. That's why I do footnotes. Anyway, the original source was not saying such a thing at all. They were saying, yeah, do the flu vaccine. Yes, it's important. Yes, it reduced the incidence of flu, just not as much as we were hoping for this year. So I post that, and my Facebook friend and a couple of her other Facebook friends took exception to my posting that. Nope, not true at all. The flu vaccine made it worse this year. Do not get flu vaccines. Well, what's sad is these are teachers posting this, people in the education business, people who work with kids posting this, not doing the intellectual work of make sure what you're posting is true before you post it. Just saying. I've been guilty of it. I'm sure you've been guilty of it. You post something and then you find out, oops, nope, not true at all. And you could double down on it because heaven forbid you ever were wrong about something. Or you just admit that, yep, you're right. Thank you for pointing out I was wrong. I just last night saw something posted about, this whole Roseanne Barr thing, which will be old news in another week. Anyway, Roseanne Barr tweeted something racist and got fired. Her whole TV show got canceled over it for, if you're listening to this in the future where you're going, what the hell is he talking about? Anyway, so a Facebook friend last night, and I was in the middle of paying bills and so on, so I took a break and went on Facebook. Why? I don't know. But anyway, this Facebook friend posted something. It was a photograph of Whoopi Goldberg in a t-shirt. And then I don't remember the slogan on it, but the drawing on the t-shirt is a drawing of Donald Trump using a gun and blowing his brains out. And this person was saying, why is this okay for liberals but not for conservatives? Well, the truth is, and I knew it at the time, that's a fake picture. But I was busy and didn't go research to debunk it, so I let that one go. So how many people are going to read that? Now, here's what I know from dealing with this person in the past. I post something to debunk it. They won't believe it. They'll just ignore it. But the power of debunking it isn't for them. The power of debunking it is for their other people who see that post. And perhaps a few of them will say, oh, fake news, right there. And that's why it's important to stand up to this stuff. Make sure the internet's not a safe place for fake news. So that was quite a tear that had very little to do with where I was headed with this video. But, yeah, that's one that bothers me. To get back to the driving video thing, so I try to post my sources, and no, I'm not posting a source for that picture, because, God, that was disgusting. But I try to post my sources so you can debunk me. If I say something that's incorrect or wrong, tell me. I want to know. I've been debunked a few times on some claims I made with fountain pens. I had an interesting discussion just last week about fountain pen ink and a couple issues with fountain pen ink that I'd never heard of before. I like to think that I've been doing this long enough and done enough pen restoration, enough reading on pens that I'd know something. That doesn't mean I don't have a few things to learn. What I learned last week is that a lot of the Japanese fountain pen inks tend to be alkaline, and that alkali, that's base, tends to be bad for rubber, natural rubbers, latex, as in the latex sacks in fountain pens. Well, I didn't know that. You'd think I would, but I didn't. So I learned something. Now, I could have doubled down and been defensive. Now, I didn't leap to my own defense right away. I didn't immediately say, oh, thank you for debunking me, because this person didn't cite any sources other than their own expertise. So I researched it, at first hoping to debunk them, because I've done that on my channel too, where people post things and are like, no, not true, and here's your evidence. But turned out that it was true, which is a shame, because I like a lot of Japanese inks, and I have a lot of vintage pens that I like to use them in, so that's a little awkward. But now I know it's not a good idea, and hey, if I don't have to deal with sack failure because I stopped using Japanese inks in my fountain pens, I am okay with that. So, anyway, with these driving videos, I think what I'm trying to do is delve a little bit into a topic a little more deeply than you might find. A lot of what you see on TV news is very punchline, very brief. I like a few YouTubers that comment on the news, but again, most of them are very brief, very punchline type of things. You know, David Pakman does some interesting interviews. Once in a while, he'll do a really good deep dive piece, but mostly very punchline. Young Turks is like that. Jimmy Dore's like that. I can't remember the guy's name. Kyle Kalinski's like that. And a lot of them, they'll find some news piece and then they'll just comment it to death without going very deep. And that's part of video. People don't like deep dives quite often. They're boring. Especially when you start to dive deep into a topic and you realize that there's a lot of nuance here. Like, you know, we'll get rid of a few subscribers here. I don't like Donald Trump. I think he's a disaster as a president. Does that mean everything he does is wrong and I'll oppose it? No. He's done a few things that I like a lot. Just not enough of them. And definitely counterbalanced by the other. I thought Obama was an okay president, although I was a lot more conservative back when he was first elected. But there were some things I liked about him. I liked the fact that he got the idea of nuance. You know, I was very conservative when George W. Bush was president. I voted for him. One of the things I didn't like about the man was he didn't seem to understand nuance quite often. Like his whole thing with embryonic stem cell research that, well, we'll just use the lines we have, but there will be no more. You know, I disagreed with that. But at the same time, I appreciated that he got the nuance that, oh yeah, there is a lot of good in these stem cells. But, you know, he had different views on embryos than I do. I appreciated that back then. And I still appreciate it, even though, like I said, I disagree with how he went about it and his reasoning and so on. But, that was an example of nuance. A lot of the other things he did, not so much nuance. On the other hand, I think he was the right person for directly after 9/11. I don't think Obama would have been as good right after something like 9/11. Now, as we went further in time away from 9/11, but there we're getting political, and I don't have my research down for this, so I'm going to stop there. But my point is, nuance is something people don't like. They don't like gray areas. And why does a Rush Limbaugh get to be popular? Or a Sean Hannity? It's because they're very black and white. People like that. They like decisive, final conclusions. They don't like that gray messiness of the real world. Where, maybe there is this good about this, or this bad. And like my last week's video topic was the 10 Commandments, and your diehard black and white atheists would love to hear me say, well, this is all bullshit. Your religious people would want me to talk about how this is the Word of God. Well, the reality is 10 Commandments are messy, and we've got two different sets. The one we call 10 Commandments isn't what the Bible calls the 10 Commandments, so it gets a little awkward. Which is the set that Moses brought down? The Bible kind of makes it ambiguous, even though it says that the second set, the weird one, is the one that was brought down. The way the whole Exodus thing is written sounds more like the first set, the more traditional 10 Commandments set. Later references in the New Testament don't refer to that goofy second set from Exodus 34. They refer to the earlier set that's a little less goofy. It's messy. And that's the real world. And I can't come to a firm conclusion on that. But what I think is valuable is to bring that research forward and share it with whoever's interested and let them start drawing their own conclusions. Finding out that, a lot of my opinions aren't based on facts, and I'm including myself in that. For example, why am I a Christian? Or was, I should say. Why was I a Christian? Well, grew up in the United States of America. Most people in the United States of America are Christians. If I'd been born in Saudi Arabia, I probably would have been a Muslim. If I'd been born in India, I probably would have been a Hindu. I mean, interesting to look at how much is where you're brought up. I probably would have been a lot more liberal in the beginning if I'd been brought up, say, in California instead of rural Pennsylvania and then moved to rural North Dakota. If I would have gone to a large university instead of going to the ultra-scary right-wing Grove City College. I put myself in a bubble on purpose. Because I was I don't want to go to one of them. They're liberal colleges. Why did I become liberal later in life? What's kind of interesting is a lot of my labels changed. A lot of my opinions really didn't. A few of them did. But a lot of them did not. I always used to say I'm a conservative, but I think for myself. So, I was very religious, very conservative, and yet totally in favor of gay marriage, for example. Very conservative me was happy when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of gay marriage. Imagine that. I think you'll find some of my views now are quite conservative. Well, maybe it has to do with the fact I live in right-wing North Dakota. I don't know. But I'm off the topic again. Wow, I am really doing terrible following this outline. I mean, rustling papers to prove, yes, once again, I am in my living room recording this audio, not in the car recording audio. But anyway, I try to give my sources. What I like about this format is if you do discuss an issue, people can look at it and then evaluate it for themselves. That's one of the limitations for spoken debate is you hear a claim in spoken debate and you're like, no, that's not true. How do you prove it? You're like in the middle of the debate. You can't just research all of a sudden. That's one of the things I don't like with our presidential debates is there's no fact checking. Your candidates can just spout off whatever bullshit they want, and nobody's going to say, no, that's actually not true. And if they do that, which it was weak and lackluster, they get accused of having blood coming from wherever. Yeah, that happened in our presidential debate. That really horrifying. I like written discussion or this type of thing because it does allow time to fact check. Another thing that can happen in a spoken debate is you get your gish gallop where they just spout off all kinds of nonsense. And yeah, okay, I can debunk that claim or that claim. I can't debunk them all. So you have to kind of take them as a family and debunk them. But then, but I also need time to lay out my own thesis. So, that's why gish gallop is a popular one with certain points of view. You'll hear certain commentators really love the very fast talk because they roll through so many things so quickly that you're just like, what? Oh. You don't have time to stop and think, well, that's bullshit, because they're on to the next 3 or 4 claims. And, Ben Shapiro, what the hell, I'll name him. Now, there is a problem with this format or the written format when you're discussing an issue, which is you can ignore something specific. I'm thinking recently of a 13-year-old who confronted Sarah Huckabee Sanders about school safety in regards specifically to school shootings. And you could tell visibly that threw Sarah Huckabee Sanders off of her game. That really touched a very human part of her. I could see that. I love, it's easy for me to demonize the woman. But I think that shook her because she's like, oh, yeah, you're right. We're not doing much for school safety other than platitudes. The way she answered was because she didn't really have a good answer, honestly. But my point is that is a strength of face-to-face. If there's a side to a particular issue I don't want to discuss, I can just pretend I didn't see it. Heck, you read my responses to some of the comments in my video, you might see me ignore certain ones. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm either not comfortable answering that, don't want to answer it, don't have a good answer for it, or, that's pretty out there and I just don't want to give it the time of day. Could be any one of them. But see, I can do that because it's not face-to-face. You're talking to me and you say, well, don't you think that aliens have a plot to replace fountain pens with ballpoints? You do that in the comments and I'll just be, thank you for commenting. Yeah, I love fountain pens. And I totally ignore your whole conspiracy theory about aliens trying to replace fountain pens with ballpoints. But you do that face-to-face, I'm kind of stuck having to deal with you, especially, well, didn't you hear me? I was just asking you about the alien plot to replace fountain pens with ballpoints. Like, okay, yeah, I can't just ignore you anymore. I've got to actually deal with your little bit of weirdness there. And it could be just as easily ideas that I don't want to respond to. Maybe there's a weakness in my argument that I just don't really want to deal with, and you've pounced on it. And just like, oh boy, that's going to bring the whole thing down. And so that's a weakness to this format. Okay, so yeah, I'm looking at the second column of this outline and thinking, I have been talking for 45 minutes. Let's wrap this puppy up. And I promise next week you're going to get some green video. Green as in not this white stuff all over the landscape. So where I'm headed with these driving videos, there's going to be more. I love this deep dive into topics. I have a list of topics I want to explore. And they're in a lot of different fields. You're going to hear some more analysis of religious topics. No, not going to be a religion channel. But yes, some religious topics. I want to talk about creation myths. I want to talk about what different religions believe. I want to explore different topics in the Bible. I mentioned earlier on, I used to do a little bit of preaching. I find the Bible very interesting. I know less about other religions, and that's part of why I want to do this. I want to research them and know more about what they believe, and why not share it with you? I would like to explore various science topics, various political topics, various social topics. There's just all kinds of things that I want to research and explore, and I write my notes. Yes, it's perfectly good for me to learn something for myself, but I found when I started teaching, and I don't have a reference for this, but I found that I never really understood a topic as well as I thought I did. When I would try to present circuitry, for example, to my students, wow, I really don't understand that. Because when you try to communicate something to somebody else, you really learn it a lot better. You really learn how to organize it. You organize it better in your own brain. Perhaps, I teach high school down to junior high. If I'm trying to explain Big Bang Theory to an 8th grader, I really got to bring it down to their level. There's a lot of things they just don't understand. And so how do you bring it down and yet at the same time not be lying or making things up or omitting really important things? Now, I record these videos assuming I'm not talking to 8th graders, or people that haven't perhaps researched the topic the way I have. And I'm not claiming I'm an expert on anything I present here, which is the beauty of the comment section. If you have something to throw in, I'd love to hear it. One thing I have heard, I'm not going to tell you where I heard this, because this is somebody I know personally, and I know some people would be very deeply offended that this person believes this, but I was talking to a pastor of a church who pointed out, I was just talking about a couple of religious things with him, actually. And he just pointed out that a lot of what he learned in seminary about the Bible, he can't share with his congregation because they'd run him out of town. They would be horrified at the reality behind how the Bible is and its origins and what is actually known about it. And that kind of goes in line with a few things I have read. I've read articles over the years decrying the whole seminary thing, and that pastors shouldn't go to the seminary because it detracts from the religious feeling and the religious experience and doesn't make for a good preacher. But that maybe that it undermines their faith. Well, that's a little scary, that learning about the Bible would undermine your faith. Well, I want to bring those topics here, but I can see what this pastor meant. In my town, we have a Methodist church, we have a Catholic church, we have a Lutheran church. None of those churches are creationist churches. They're all mainline. They totally, what I teach in my classroom about evolution, about Big Bang, all that, they totally accept it. And we have an Assembly of God church, that one a little iffy there. And we have a Seventh-day Adventist church, although as far as I know, no students from that one. Definitely a creationist church. And yet, I can't imagine a pastor at any one of those churches getting up and talking about the whole Genesis creation story as myth in a sermon. Because although the denomination has agreed that, yeah, Genesis is a story where we accept the scientific explanation, it gets a little more awkward when you start talking about that to your layperson in church and start saying that, oh yeah, the Genesis thing is a myth, which, by the way, is one of my upcoming driving videos. People like Aaron Raw and Matt Dillahunty do it better. I don't know that I have anything new to bring to the argument, but I'm going to do it anyway. But anyway, they won't do a sermon like that in their church. You know, that yes, we believe in God, we believe in Jesus, all that stuff, but oh, not this part, or this part, or yeah, it looks like that whole Exodus from Egypt thing probably never happened. Moses probably never existed. Abraham might be a myth. Oh, Jesus might be an amalgamation of several historical people. Oh, let's not talk about all the inconsistencies here. So, little story, since I'm off the outline anyway. I told you I went to Grove City College. This is a ultra right-wing conservative Christian college, although Presbyterian college. Although far more conservative than the Presbyterian denomination, because don't be gay at Grove City College, at least back when I was in college. Maybe they've loosened up on it now, but I doubt it. Anyway, I was reading Larry Niven back then. He's a science fiction author, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a book, had a whole bunch of essays along with short stories and so on. Anyway, one of the things pointed out that there were 2 creation myths in the Bible. And I'm just like, what? So I looked, and lo and behold, you've got Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 1, it talks about creation and creating man and woman and the animals, male and female, he made them, and so on. Genesis chapter 2, we've got Adam, and then God's like, oh, poor Adam, he just seems so lonely. So God conks him over the head, knocks him out, rips out a rib, and turns the rib into a woman, so he's got a friend. So you're telling me he didn't figure that out when he made male and female in Genesis 1, that he needs a male and female human? And what were all those dangly bits on the front of Adam for if he wasn't planning on a lady friend? So we were required to take some courses. One of the courses was on the Bible. That was actually the first time I read the Bible, because that was a requirement for the course, is to read the thing a little too fast, but anyway, to read it. And so I asked about that. I didn't quite phrase it the way I did there, and I made it much more condensed, but I asked why there's 2 creation myths. And remember, at the time, I was very, very religious and very devout, and it was a sincere question. I was attending an Orthodox Presbyterian church at the time. I wasn't trying to be a troublemaker, but that's exactly how the professor treated me, like I was a troublemaker. He said, do you even understand what you're asking? No, there's only one creation story. And by the way, Grove City College at the time was not one of those wacko creationist colleges. Yes, in one of my political science courses, we did get a guest speaker. I can't remember his name, but he was a big name, to explain why creationism is true. Why it was a political science course, I don't know. But that professor did end up being fired a little bit later. A whole scandal where they fired the president of the college, too. Nothing over this, totally unrelated. But anyway, the science department at the college was totally science-based and so on. It was just a few people in the political science department. Where was I headed with that? I was headed somewhere with that story. But anyway, this religion professor way back just thought I was being a troublemaker because I was asking, and I was legitimately trying to understand, why are there two creation stories in the Bible? Well, that ended well. A little while back, it was back when I was still trying to figure it out, back when I was rereading the Bible for a second time, I did some research on the book of Job, because that actually turns out may be one of the oldest books in the Bible. I don't have a citation for you because none of this is what's on my outline. Sorry. Anyway, apparently there's a second creation myth cited, or third creation myth cited in Job, about where it talks about the Leviathan. And doggone it, now I'm going to have to write that down to do a video on that too. But yeah, you have to remember the whole thing started as an oral tradition, and then people started writing the things down, and then you had different groups come together and like, oh, this doesn't match up with this, and they try and smoosh it all together, and then you have the whole Christian thing starting, and they're trying to work with this Old Testament and make it match up with their New Testament. And we got different people writing long after all the events supposedly occurred, trying to moosh it all together, make it all make sense. But we don't have a printing press, so everything written gets copied by hand. And when you copy by hand, sometimes you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Oh, that's kind of harsh. Let's fix that up a little. Like the whole woman at the well story about, he was without sin amongst you, cast the first stone story. No, was added later. That's not in the original manuscripts. And anyway, a lot of pastors have been to seminary, and your Catholic priests know a lot more about the Bible than they can really share to their congregation. Because a lot of their congregation will be creationists. Believe that the Bible's the infallible Word of God. Now you go back to that song, might be a little dust on the Bible, don't let it fool you about what's inside. I totally butchered that. I'm sorry to whoever sang that song. But the message behind the song was that, yeah, I don't read the Bible much, but it's a good book and there's a lot of good stuff in it. How do you know if you haven't read it? Pick the thing up and read it. Which, by the way, is a consistent message for me from back when I was religious. Funny story, I got to be the way I am because I said, oh, yeah, I haven't really read this thing since college. I should read it. Whoops. I might read it again one of these days, who knows. It is a bugger to slog through, so I may, if I reread it, I may not bother with the King James translation. I may do a different one that's a little more easy to read, because King James is brutal. But anyway, my point there is that there's a lot we know about it now that people just aren't ready to accept. And by the way, that's not just Christianity. Shall we talk about the Book of Mormon? Shall we talk about the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, or any of the many, many books in Hindu religion? Because the Hindus have been around a lot longer than Christians or Jews. Their religion's a lot older. They've got a lot more writing. And a lot more inconsistency and woo-woo going on as a result. And, yeah, kind of interesting. Religion itself is just such an interesting topic. We've got three faiths kind of based on the same basic geographical area. And they even have roughly the same Old Testament. I was just talking to... Yeah, I have these conversations, believe it or not, to somebody about the story of Isaac and Abraham. And weird that it came up when I briefly mentioned it last week in my whole Ten Commandments video. But anyway, I pointed out that in the Quran, I had to fact check myself on this. It doesn't explicitly say it's Isaac, But the Quran, the child being sacrificed is a much more willing participant, although the story ends the same. In the Bible, it never mentions about how Isaac felt about his dad tying him up and putting him on the altar over the wood that he's going to burn. I don't know about you, but most kids I know would be pretty terrified. I know I would have been, and fighting for all I was worth. And when Dad says, "Oh, nope, here's a goat. Sorry, sorry, Isaac. My bad. It's just God told me to sacrifice you," and I guess he changed his mind, kind of a horrifying story, really, when you think about it. But at least in the Quran, the kid is a little more willing. So I might have to do that. Maybe compare the Quran version to the Bible version. That might be kind of fun, actually. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about. I would kind of like to do So back on the topic of the video, I'll just jump to the end of my outline here. So I would like to do another video on why I live in North Dakota. Maybe a little bit about why I'm questioning that choice now as that I'm older. What I'd like to do when I retire. I would like to do... I just have a whole bunch of topics that I'd like to talk about. So anyway, I'll jump into one of them next week. I won't probably use the rest of this outline now. See, sometimes they really get me going. Anyway, I will have something greener for you. At the very minimum, a couple of weeks ago, I drove up to Dickinson. Not that it's a terribly exciting trip, but I'm just tired of looking at snow as I drive. I also have a whole drive from Mandan to where I live on Old Highway 10, which I need to use that footage. It's with the old dash cam, but what the hell? I've got the footage on the hard drive. Plus, I've got upcoming, for sure, a trip to Fargo. And then I will be headed north from Fargo, and I plan to take a tour through the northeast corner of the state, which I haven't spent a whole lot of time in. Pembina Gorge and so on, which I think will be, it's interesting to me, and I think it'll be interesting to you. It'll be new territory. Fargo will be new territory. I've got a couple videos planned for Fargo. I never did my Pens on the Road, where I was going to talk about the Fargo campus. I've got 2 years worth of video footage taken on the Fargo campus. So I want to use that, and since I will at some point be spending a week in Fargo within walking distance of the campus, I may walk over there one night. This is Ludlow, South Dakota, by the way. But I might walk over to the NDSU campus in Fargo one evening and do a video. I want to do a video on higher education and the value of it, and some of the conspiracies about it. And since I'll be on spot, you may actually see my face more than you typically would. So it'll be less of a driving video, more of a me talking video. So I guess I better take my tripod along. I would like to do a video or two about downtown Fargo, places you can buy fountain pens and so on, and what Fargo is like. I've thought about a video comparing city living to small town living, but then I realized that Fargo really isn't a city. North Dakota standards, yes. Worldwide standards, no. It's a large small town. Where I live is a nothing on the map, and would be nothing in North Dakota, except for everything else is even smaller and is more spread out. So I suppose I could do a compare-contrast between my town and Fargo, but I don't know what's the point. One has more stores than the other, one has more people, and the other one has more traffic than the other. So I don't think I'll be doing that. But to explore Fargo for Fargo's own sake, yeah. And I also feel like since I'm there for a full week, I need to one evening drive over to Castleton, North Dakota, because Castleton High School, which is called Central Cass High School, look it up. I've got the footnote right here. Their school mascot is the squirrels. So I've got to get some video footage of me standing beside a squirrel in Castleton somehow. I'm going to do it. And Castleton's actually a rather attractive town. It's like my town. It's smaller, but it's bigger than my town. Rather nice main street, especially considering how close it is to Fargo by interstate. It's really nice. Not as nice as it could be. My town actually has more business, but Castleton is a nice, nice, nice town. I wouldn't mind some aspects of living there, actually. Holy cow, I just noticed. Yeah, I didn't expect to get this far in the footage either. So I'm going to bring this to a close here. So I want to thank you for watching this long, rambling, way off the outline video. I don't even know what the hell was my point now. And now I know I'm going to have to go back through, and everything I wrote down for footnote, I might have to change a few footnotes. So I'll be watching this thing. So it was kind of warm and sunny. I didn't want to overheat myself by digging in the garden right now, but I've got some garden digging yet to do today. And so I thank you for watching. I'm going to abandon you here somewhere in South Dakota, but very close to the North Dakota state line. And I'm not going to pick you up for the rest of this voyage home because it's just not that interesting. So I'll pick you up somewhere green next week with another topic. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.